I noticed that, Jamie, but as you got a bit older and obviously when you got married and there was a brand there and all this, but I just go back to the David Beckham that I played with and worked with, and that was a player who worked hard every day and gave everything for the cause. That's it. That's it for me. There was no...
Well, what about his skill set that was so particular, do you think?
Well, where do you want to start? He could get an assist, he could get you a goal, he was brilliant at set pieces, he could run all day for you, get up and down that line. Well, he had to with Nev behind him. So
We'll get back to Roy in just a quick second, but remember, if you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. And don't forget to click the notification button so that you know when the next Big D video hits. And also, if you've got something to say, please put it in the comments. I read all of the comments and I'm very keen to hear if you agree, disagree, or if you think I'm talking nonsense. Anyway, this is going to be part 2 of my fun little trilogy of Roy Keane's best Manchester United 11 in Premier League history. And part 2 is the Midfielders. Now, there might be a couple of controversial choices here from Roy. Maybe you agree with him, maybe you don't. But stick around after the clip because I am going to be giving my opinion on Roy's picks and I am going to be giving you my choice of greatest Man United midfielders in history. Premier League history, that is. Anyway, here's Roy.
Well, obviously, they can come in.
All right, let's have a look at the midfielders. Again, a really big pool for you to choose from, Roy. We put them all in together. So let's start with the central midfielders, and presumably you're going to rule yourself out.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to pick myself. Brian Robson has to go in there. Obviously, Brian was a great player for Man United, full of courage, scored some big goals for the club when Man United were obviously weren't at their best.
And who's going to play alongside?
I'm going to put Nicky Butt. Had some brilliant days with Butty, even obviously Scholesy. This one obviously is up for debate. But next to Robbo, I'm going to put Paul Ince. Because Ince was again another very, very good player. It maybe tarnished his United reputation. Of course, he ended up playing at Liverpool or whatever. And Ince, when he was at United, it was all talk about Ince being the governor, and people kind of held that against him. But that was just banter. There was no nastiness with that. Ince was a really good teammate, and I thought a very, very good player. Tough leaving Scholes out, of course, and Butty, brilliant players and brilliant characters, just as important. But I thought Ince, when I first went to Man United, they just won the league. I think the first year I went there, I think we won the double. Ince was brilliant midfield, and Rob was coming towards the end, so I was kind of getting a taste of it. And Ince was a good teammate to have next year in terms of the trenches. Again, he could head it, he could defend, he get you a goal, strong. And do you know what? I enjoyed his company.
I think he's one of those players who doesn't get spoken enough, Paul Ince. Because you think of, when we talk about great midfield, we all talk about Roy and sort of Vieira, and then we go to sort of Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes, different types of players. But Paul Ince, when you think at the start of the Premier League sort of era, really, you know, when Manchester United were being successful, he was unbelievable, wasn't he? And when he came to Liverpool, he certainly didn't produce maybe what he did at Manchester United, getting a little bit older, but he could do everything. I mean, both feet, he could score goals, he was good in the air, he was quick. For a sentiment, you could get across the ground as well.
But I think if people held against Ince maybe his personality. They thought, again, I go back to that governor when that was his nickname, and it was just, but that was just, he was far from that. He was a brilliant fella. That was just a bit of crack in the dressing room. Good lad. As I said, the players you look around when you go into big matches, we always used to remind ourselves, you got a fella next year. Are you happy with him in the trenches next year? And you'd have Ince all day long, as you would with Scholesy and Butty. They're the two I thought. And I'll probably see them in the next few weeks, and you know, I'll face the music then. But I'm going to go with Ince.
How did it work with you and Paul Ince together in terms of midfield? So when you mentioned sort of Scholes or Nicky Butt, I felt obviously the older you got, you can become more the holding player, and maybe Scholes would go forward. Was it different when you first got the team?
I think it was just chemistry, Jimmy. I think it was chemistry. I think again when I got to the club, me and Ince, obviously Man United, most times we played 4-4-2. You'd obviously one striker dropping in, but generally two in midfield. And the way we used to do it, and I'd same with Butty and same with Scholes, whoever I was playing with, if one went forward, the other one would just sit in. And whoever was going forward usually did have a goal in him, like you said, Ince, or if I went forward. So you just take your turns. It was just to get a bit of chemistry. It wasn't anything we walked on the training pitch. And the same when I went with Scholes, or if when I was with Butty, or even Varane, it's just that bit of common sense. If someone's getting forward or they're getting that opportunity, I'll just cover for you, no problem.
You know, when you joined the club, we're talking about that role with Paul Ince, but obviously Brian Robson was still still at the club. And I watched a documentary on him a few weeks back, and the esteem he's held in at Manchester United. Could you sort of feel
I knew that
presence when
of
you
course.
first went to the
And
club?
obviously I played against Rob a few times when I was at Forest. So going there, when I was even growing up, the two midfielders I really admired as a kid growing up was Glenn Hoddle and Brian Robson, for different reasons. Glenn Hoddle for his brilliant skill, and I followed Spurs, but Brian Robson for what he'd done, and I thought he was just, the word I'd always think of Rob, I think great courage, in terms of getting in the box, picking up a lot of injuries, but dead brave, but ironically then when I went to Man United, I remember like yesterday meeting Robbo for the first time, and I shook his hand, and it was one of them, and I literally were staring at each other, and the nature of the game, like I've said earlier, is I'm shaking his hand, but he knows I'm after his position. And we're looking and we're going, yeah, but that's the game, and that's what you want at your club, competition, going, you're after my position. And Robbo stayed on another year or two, but of course he was picking up injuries. He was probably 33, 34 then. And that's the machine of Man United. Great player like Brian Robson's going out, but I'm thinking, I've got to try and replace him and do my best.
What was he like to play against? You mentioned you did that a few times.
Yeah, Robbo, yeah, very, very difficult, because he was tenacious, he was brave, but again, the great thing for me, I think what I learned more in my career is when I was playing against brilliant players, were against Ronnie Whelan or Brian Robson, these players, Gaza, I think I'm learning when I'm playing against them because of their movement, and when they were making runs or when they were dropping deep or whatever it was, or when I was watching them on the television. Conversations, I had great conversations with Brian Robson, just sometimes it was over a few pints, and he'd be telling me about my game where I'd have to change. Because when I went to Man United, my game was probably a bit like when I was at Forest. I would just get forward and get on the end of things and try and get a goal. But he had a conversation with Robbo one day. He said, look, Roy, if you want to become a really top midfielder, you do have to get more involved in the build-up, which I didn't have the confidence to do that. But he said, it's something you have to learn. And towards the end of my career, that was probably one of my strengths, and that was part of the game I really enjoyed, and that was getting it off the back four and dictating play or whatever it might be. But that was something, just from a conversation, I thought to myself, if I'm not going to listen to Brian Robson, I might as well get out of the game. So it's snippets of information you get from great players.
It's a good midfield, isn't it? Brian Robson and Paul Ince. Who's going to play in the wide areas then? You've got two to pick. You mentioned Lee Sharp before.
Yeah, Sharpie, brilliant, yeah. Sharpie's a brilliant player, a really brilliant player at Man United, particularly in his younger days where he came in from Turkey, hit the ground running, went on for England. Ended up, I think, the manager got fed up with Sharpie a little bit, maybe for his lifestyle. But Sharpie was a big help to me when I went to Man United, on and off the pitch. He was a brilliant fella, great company. But Sharpie misses out because you can't pick a Man United team and leave Giggsy out. So Giggsy goes in on the left-hand side.
25 trophies, 13 Premier League titles.
Brilliant. Giggsy, and I think we hear, when I hear managers talking about players being consistent, then Giggsy has to go in. And on the right side, I have to go with Becks. I thought Becks was obviously a brilliant player again, and Giggsy and Becks in the dressing room, brilliant characters. You can't speak highly enough of them. They were consistent. That's the key.
How did you sort of dovetail with David Beckham, whose birthday it is today, apparently, in terms of the personality? Was he different to what we saw on the outside?
Yeah, you could tell that because Becks was a bit younger. He was he was from London. He loved his gear. He loved his cars. But what you'd always look for in any player who comes into the first team, particularly young players, they'll have hobbies, they'll have things they like. But the key for me is when I was watching a young player, and I'd watch him closely, and Beck's being one of them, going, are they training properly? Are they giving everything for the cause in terms of their training on a match day? And Beck's done that. So I didn't care what Beck's was doing. Good luck to him. If I thought the cars and whatever else he was doing was becoming a distraction, then you'd pull a young player, you go, listen, remember what your priority is. But I don't think I once ever fell out with Becks about anything, because I just thought he turned up every day and put a shift in. Same for Giggsy. And again, these were young lads going out and enjoyed themselves. They weren't going home every night, and going to bed like never half a state. These lads were enjoying themselves, but they had the balance right. Yeah, go out and enjoy yourself. But when we train, and when we turn up for a game at Man United, you give everything you have. Simple as that.
Do you think sort of the world that David Beckham went into, some people say it elevated him to, he was seen as one of the best players in the world, and he'd get criticism for that and saying he's not that. But I actually think the flip side of that, I almost think, the stardom and the lifestyle and whatever, you'd almost forget how good he was. I mean,
I take no notice of that, Jamie, but as he got a bit older, and obviously when he got married and there was a brand there and all this, but I just go back to the David Beckham that I played with and worked with, and that was a player who worked hard every day and gave everything for the cause. That's it. That's it for me. There was no...
Or what about his skill set that was so particular, do you think?
Well, where do you want to start? He could get an assist, he could get you a goal, he was brilliant at set pieces, he could run all day for you, he'd get up and down that line. Well, he had to with Nev behind him. So he'd everything you want in a wide player. When balls are coming in from Giggsy, Bex was getting in there. On the other side, where Bex was putting in, Giggsy was getting in there. The amount of goals they got from each other's crosses, because they had a desire, they had a work rate. And when they won trophies, which they did, they moved on very quickly. I never felt ever with even Giggsy, and obviously Giggsy was in the team before me, that you felt they were distracted by the off-the-field stuff. Giggsy at the time was, off the field. Giggsy had a lot of commitments and was a superstar in a sense. But his priority was his football, and that's why they were great teammates to have.
Some people have talked about David Beckham being better suited in midfield. We saw it centre midfield. We saw it a few times with England, playing in that sort of playmaker role at times.
Yeah,
but was that crossing ability that was so unique? Was that why he had to play wide and better suited to play
Possibly
wide?
So, and obviously he wasn't good enough to get in the middle of the pitch at Man United. That was the best option for him. And obviously he wasn't in the madness of midfield where you needed a bit of aggression sometimes. And I suppose the days we played, whereas Bex was suited just to be on that right-hand side where he'd be going wide. Listen, sometimes the old-fashioned, he'd be inside right. And he'd football intelligence. He knew when to go wide. And we talk about being smart. He knew he didn't have to beat a man to cross the ball. Just give him half a yard and he just had to... It's like we see Trent at Liverpool. He just had that technique where defenders didn't know what to do with him. If they got too tight, then he could do him a little bit. Or to be fair, Nev was always giving him an option. But when you're in a good team, the beauty is when you do get the ball, even when I had it midfield, good teams give you options, whether it be striker, a full-back, a winger, someone stretching, someone coming short. That's what you want in a good team.
We built the back four. We built the midfield. We've got quality on the wings. We've got a bit of everything in the middle of the park, haven't we? So we just need to...
Well, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, a couple of strange choices there, in my personal opinion. And that has to be the two central midfielders, Brian Robson and Paul Ince. I mean, I don't have a problem with Brian Robson per se. I mean, Brian Robson is an absolute legend of Manchester United. He carried the team on its back in the 80s when they were rubbish. And he is arguably the greatest captain in Manchester United's history and arguably the greatest midfielder in Manchester United's history. He was fantastic. I mean, there's that legendary story of him, well, it's not even a story, it's a fact, of him absolutely dominating Diego Maradona at Old Trafford in, I think it was the 1984 Cup Winners' Cup quarter-final, was it? Where Man United were 2-0 down after the first leg at the Nou Camp, and then they won 3-0 in the second leg, and he was carried off the pitch by the fans because he got a man-of-the-match performance. And that was Brian Robson, and he ended his career at Manchester United in the right way, in that he had 2 Premier League winning medals. He'd won the Cup Winners' Cup when the Cup Winners' Cup was actually a major European trophy, and he'd won about 3 FA Cups by then, 4 maybe. Did he get a medal in 94? No, he didn't. He didn't play the final, actually, controversially. But still, he'd won it 3 times before, and he lifted it in 1990, and Ferguson's first trophy. So I don't have a problem with Brian Robson per se. However, if we're going to pick greatest Premier League 11, then by the time the Premier League started, Brian Robson was long past his prime. Long past his prime. And even Roy Keane alludes to that there, you know, when they shook hands and there was that understanding that Roy was there to take his job. He was about 34 or 35 at that point. So, and back then, footballers didn't have massively long careers, especially players that were as injury prone as Brian Robson. So he wasn't the player that he was, and it's for that reason that I personally wouldn't have picked Brian Robson. But kudos to Brian Robson, and he's obviously a hero of Roy Keane, as he says there in the clip. So who am I to disagree with Roy Keane? However, on his second pick, I am going to disagree. And for the reasons that Roy actually touches upon in this clip. I'm not picking Paul Ince in a Man United all-time Premier League 11. No, he signed for the Scousers. I'm sorry, call me a biased Man United fan. Sorry, not sorry, but he signed for Liverpool, and you just don't do that. You can get away with maybe someone signs for Man City or an Arsenal or a Chelsea, but Liverpool? No. Even Leeds? No. I wouldn't do that, but I will give the devil his due, and that is Paul Ince was an absolutely phenomenal midfielder, and he was, and quite rightly, he doesn't get the kudos that he should. He was one of the best players in the Premier League in his prime when he was playing for Man United, and he quite rightly could do everything on the pitch. He was the complete, or a complete, box-to-box central midfielder. Phenomenal athlete, could bomb up and down. He had iron lungs, could tackle, he was nasty, he was competitive, good personality, he could score, he could pass, and he was a big game player as well. He was an absolutely incredible player, and I mean, wow, he could slot into any team in world football now, no problem, and still be one of the best players in the world. He was class, and it's no surprise that Inter Milan signed him when they did. And he did really well for Inter Milan as well. And bear in mind, the Premier League wasn't the best league in the world at that time. Serie A was the best league in the world at the time, and Inter Milan were one of the biggest teams in the world at the time. So he signed for them in the best league in the world, and he was class for them as well. And he only came back to England because of, for personal reasons really, because Inter Milan didn't want him to leave. So, but when he chose Liverpool, of all the teams he could have signed for, because he'll have had options, he chose Liverpool. And it's like, come on, Paul. So no, Paul Ince doesn't get into my all-time Manchester United 11. I'm sorry, but that's a no. David Beckham, on the other hand, I think Roy has picked well there. I mean, Becks was class. It was a sad day that David Beckham left Manchester United. He was a supreme athlete, quite rightly. He could bomb up and down that line, and he could get forward, he could get back, and I really like that little joke there that when he stuck it to Gary Neville, saying that he had to be able to get back with Gary Neville behind him. I thought that was good, that was funny. It's always nice to see the banter there, and absolutely world-class passer of a ball, and his set pieces were phenomenal, and he is probably he is, it's not even probably, he is one of the greatest passers of the ball in world football history, and massively underrated, really. Massively underrated. And I mean, some people used to say he wasn't world class. Of course he was world class. Big game player, could score a goal, had loads of assists in him, could carry a team as well, as he did for England in 2001. And the biggest issue that people used to always make about David Beckham, which Roy Keane mentions here, is, oh well, he's not world class because he can't beat a man. He didn't need to. He didn't need to. Just give him the ball, he'll whip it in, and Dwight York or Andy Cole will score a header. No problem. Becks was class, and it was just his fame that overshadowed that, and it's really nice to see Jamie Carragher acknowledge that as well, because I really like Jamie Carragher as a pundit. As a player, I couldn't stand him, but as a pundit, really, really, really like him, because I don't know, I feel as though he hits the nail on the head with United, good or bad, and he gives them a fair crack of the whip. Some people would disagree. If you disagree, thoughts in the comments. But that's the Big D's opinion on that. So Beck's fine. Giggsy on the left. Giggsy was, it's Ryan Giggs, Mr. Manchester United, all-time most appearances. I think he's got the most assists in Premier League history as well. So, I mean, Giggsy is a given on the left. Although, Big D wouldn't have picked Giggsy. He wouldn't have picked Giggsy. And that's not because I didn't think Giggs was good enough. Giggs is brilliant, but it depends on who's going to get picked, in Roy's case anyway, on who's going to get picked for the forwards. Because the big D's midfield would have been David Beckham, agree with Roy on that. The two central midfielders would have been Roy Keane himself. Roy Keane doesn't want to pick himself. I'm going to pick Roy Keane. Roy Keane. Because there hasn't been a better midfielder in Premier League, central midfielder in Premier League history than Roy Keane. And I mean, you could go with Paul Ince. I'm not gonna. But the thing is, I like to have a little bit of a balance in midfield, in my midfield choices. So if Roy Keane's going to be the box-to-box, you need someone alongside him that's going to add a little bit more nuance, a little bit more nous. And, you know, who better than Paul Scholes? You could pick Carrick in there, I suppose. Darren Fletcher was a good player, but he was too similar to Roy Keane in that he was more of a box-to-box. And he wasn't quite as good as Roy Keane, as good as Darren Fletcher was. But yeah, I've got to go with Paul Scholes all day. But on the left, the big D goes with Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, Cristiano Ronaldo started off as a winger. And he always played his best football on the left for Manchester United, cutting in onto his right foot and scoring from there. And, you know, as his career progressed, he got further forward, became an inside forward when everything went to 4-3-3, and then eventually became a centre forward. But we're talking about his time at Manchester United, Premier League history. So I've got to go with Cristiano Ronaldo. And again, that is no, you know, that is nothing against Giggsy. Struggling to find the words. That is nothing against Giggsy. But I don't want to put Cristiano Ronaldo as a centre forward because I've got other picks, and we'll get to that in part 3. But you've got to have Cristiano Ronaldo in that team because he won the Ballon d'Or while he was at Man United, and he's only one of 4 players to have won the Ballon d'Or for Manchester United. So you've got to put Cristiano on the left. And for what he done in 2008, you can't not have him in there. So, yeah, the big D's 4 would be Beckham, Keane, Scholes, and Cristiano Ronaldo. But Roy's 4, Beckham, Robson, Paul Ince, and Ryan Giggs. So those are quite different, those 2 picks there. But anyway, I've talked enough in this video. Now I want to do some reading, and I want to read your comments. What do you think about Roy's picks? Do you agree with him? What do you think of my picks? Do you agree with me? Or do you have your own? Would you prefer to see Nicky Butt in there, perhaps? Or Darren Fletcher? Or Michael Carrick, even? Maybe there's a couple of Juan Sebastian Veron fans out there. I very much doubt it. Not from his time at Manchester United, but you never know. There might be some fans from Argentina that would pick him. But yeah, thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.